Welcome to LeapFrog BI Academy course BD120, Data Flow Diagram. In this course, we're going to pick off where we left off from in course BD110, which was our Dimensional Modeling Introduction course. In that course, we created a simple dimensional model with 4 dimensions and 1 fact based on the AdventureWorks sample database as a source system. And in this course, we are going to first introduce data flow diagrams, and then we're going to actually create a data flow diagram to support our existing dimensional model. So prior to taking this course, it would be advisable to watch BD 100, where we discuss the development workflow at a high level, and of course BD 110, where we actually created the dimensional model that we're going to be focusing on throughout this course. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is take a look at our existing dimensional model. Now, when we came up with this model, we talked about how we had interviewed our business sponsors, and they described what the requirements were. And we, at this point, feel like that if we had a data structure that's represented by this model in place, that we would be able to fulfill all of the requirements. So in this course, we're going to be talking about how exactly do we get the data from the source system and create this model. Now, we're not to the point yet we're going to be doing any real development. We're still in a design and architectural mode here. This is a BD, or before development begins, course. So we are going to be still working in Visio, actually creating these diagrams. Okay, so we generally want to create our dimensions before our fact table, because the fact table needs to look up the foreign keys, which are going to point to the surrogates in each dimension. So I'm just going to pick one of these dimensions. We'll focus on dim product first. The goal of this dimension, of course, is to give us a list of products that we can collect all the product attributes in, including subcategory and category, which is a product hierarchy. And then we're going to make that available to our facts so that whenever we do present sales, we can then break that data down by the related product. So let's jump over now to the source system and take a look at what our source actually has in it. So I've taken a little bit of time here and going through the available tables here, and I know that my production schema product table is the primary source for my product information. Inside of here, I've got product name, I have product number, I have a lot of attributes related to product. However, I don't have subcategory and I don't have category. What I do have, though, is a subcategory ID. And then if I go over to my subcategory table, which is going to be right here, also in the production schema, I'll notice that I have my subcategory ID here as well. And inside of this table, I have a subcategory name, and this will then get me an ID that will take me over to my actual category. So this is a typical normalized schema for an OLTP system. Now, we don't want to present something like this to our users. There's no real reason that we would want to make a user have to create 3 joins just to get product information. This is a fairly simple one to put all into one table. So we're going to try to make that happen. I create this simple query here where I am joining my product table to my subcategory table, and then my subcategory table to my category table, so that I can kind of get a closer look at the data itself. And a couple of things I'm looking for here are, number one, what is the primary key of my product table? I can see that that's actually a product ID, which is great. And then I also notice in my product table I have a modified date. So these are 2 key things that I need to know about the source system. What is the key of that source, and how do I know if a record has changed in that source? I'm in good shape here because I have a primary key and I have a field that's dedicated to let me know if something has been modified for any of the attributes within a record. If I look at subcategory and category, I'll find much of the same. Again, category and a modified date here. Same thing for subcategory. If I look at that, I've got a primary key here, and I also have my modified date. So very consistent, nice layout, should make our lives easy during the development phase here. Now, one thing I did notice is that this product table contains not only products that have actually been sold or that are complete, but it also completes these unfinished goods. And there's a flag in here that's called finished goods flag, that whenever that flag is set to 0, just by looking at the data, I can see that that product is not actually being sold. There is no subcategory or category information for it. And since I'm only going to be focused on sales for this particular data mart, I could go ahead and filter out those finished goods equals 1 type products. This is really it's a decision that isn't right or wrong either way. If I felt like at some point I might want to extend this data mart and include unfinished goods, then I might go ahead and include that data at this point. But since I know that I'm not creating a data mart for that purpose, and I don't have any information that says I'm eventually going to be creating a data mart for that purpose, I'm going to go ahead and filter out these finished goods whenever I'm actually extracting the data. Okay, so we know what tables are at play here. We have an idea about how they relate to each other, and we also know what we're trying to create. And that's a single dimension, which has our product attributes, subcategory attributes, and category attributes. So let's now jump over to a new diagram here, and I'm opening up a template here that's specifically created for LeapFrogBI components. I'll attach the stencil that I'm using to this course so that if you would like to use the same stencil, you'll have it available to you. It's pretty simple here. I'll just expand this so you can see what we have. There is a shape here for each of the different types of components in LeapFrogBI. And you'll notice if I drag a shape onto the design surface, I have the shape data. And the shape data is set up to accept the inputs that I want to collect, the information I want to collect about these components at this point of the design process. Again, like I mentioned, I believe in earlier courses, I'm trying to do as little documentation as I possibly can while still ensuring that when I get to my development phase that I have all the information I need to move through the development process smoothly. Okay, in addition to these components, there are also a couple of design patterns. For example, this is a source design pattern, just a few components linked together. This is a dimension design pattern. Let me zoom out of that a little bit so you can see the whole thing. And then this is a fact design pattern. Looks pretty much the same as the previous. Then we have a few different types of connections here. We'll talk about those as we work through this course. Okay. So we know that we want to create a dimension, and we know that this dimension is going to be sourced from 3 different source tables. I am going to go ahead and just drag onto my design surface here a design pattern for a dimension, and we're going to start from there. Let me zoom in here a little bit. There we go. Keep it all on the screen. Now, we talked about these different component types briefly in the development workflow video. So I'm not gonna discuss too much about the purpose, but I will briefly mention that as we work through this data flow diagram, because this may be the first time that you've been exposed to these names. So profile. The profile is what we're going to do, what we're going to actually provide to LeapFrogBI whenever we start the development process. So what we're going to say here is, well, I'm going to profile a source table and I'm just going to call it product. And that is that's basically what this is saying. This is a profile shape, which means I need to create a profile that I'm going to provide to LeapFrogBI. And I'm calling that profile the same name as the source table, which is product. I'm going to come back and work on some of these other attributes in a moment. I always name the stage and PSA components the same as the source table that is feeding them. So now I have a profile, I have a stage, which again just moves data from the source system to the destination, which is one that LeapFrogBI will create and maintain. This is a volatile staging area. In other words, it gets truncated and loaded upon each execution. Then we have a PSA, or persistent staging area. This is where we're going to consolidate our data. So we're never going to delete anything from here. We're not going to update anything in here. We're only going to add any new versions of records that the system sees. All right, so we got our we're going to bring the data in with a profile. We've got our product stage, our product PSA. Then we have a couple of transformation components. What we want to do whenever we're loading our dimension is we want to select out of our PSA any records that have not been processed in previous executions. So the purpose of this DS, or dimension source, is to do just that. It's going to select records from my PSA that have not been processed previously. And I'm going to call that my DS product. Now the next thing I have here is a DA, or dimension aggregation. The role of this component is to ensure that the data being fed to the dimension when we're trying to load the dimension is at the right level of aggregation or grain. In this case, we know that this dimension is going to be at the grain of a product, which is going to use a business key to identify that grain, which is a product ID, if you remember from the source system. Now, since I know that my source has a primary key of product ID, and I know that my dimension has a dimension key of product ID, I don't need to apply any aggregations here. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and inactivate this component. I could delete it, but I'm going to leave it here just for simplicity. Okay, so we don't need a DA. In my dimension, again, I'm just going to call this dim product, and that's pretty much it. We're going to go straight from our dimension source into the dimension, and LeapFrogBI will take care of making sure that dimension is loaded correctly. Finally, down here, this light gray line is just indicating this is a precedence, not a lineage. It's saying once this dimension finishes loading, then go ahead and move to this component. And this component is a DULS, which is a dimension update load status component. All it's going to do is update a flag that we're going to place in our PSA where we keep track of which records have been processed and which records have not been processed. That's going to use the data that was captured in the dimension source to make sure that the correct records are updated. All right, so let's go through here and do a couple more things. First of all, my connection on my my profile, I'm just going to call this my AdventureWorks connection. In these two components, what I like to do is just actually create a connection for each of my component types. So I'll create a stage connection. We'll talk more about what these connections look like in a moment, or in future courses actually. My transformations, I'm going to put these two in a transform connection, and then my dimension I'm going to put in my data warehouse connection. Finally, I have this update PSA, which will also be in my PSA connection. What will end up happening is each of these connections will be working on different schemas and databases, and we'll line them up however we want, but at this point it really just doesn't matter. We're just capturing this information so we know what we're going to do when we start actually developing. Okay, a couple more things here. If we look at our profile, that looks like it's in pretty good shape. We've captured everything we need, with the exception of our incremental load. It's not mod date, it's modified date. And what we're saying there is that we're going to collect any record that has a modified date newer than any record we've received in the past. Pretty simple. Now, how do we know what we've received in the past? Well, we're going to collect a parameter here in our PSA on that modified date. And the system is going to keep track of what that latest or maximum modified date is. Now, in addition to the parameter, we're going to assign every record a record time. And we're going to talk about record times a lot more extensively in future courses. But for now, just know that this record time is how LeapFrogBI knows what the effective date for the business or the organization that we're working on. When does the business consider that record to be effective? And this is going to be used to automate a lot of things, such as specifically around slow changing dimensions, whenever we're building our dimensions, and also whenever we're looking up our foreign keys. Okay, so let's move on now to this transformation. It looks pretty good. Nothing else we really need to do here. This DA, again, it's inactive, so nothing we're going to do here, except I'm just going to put a note in here that says source primary key is same as dimension key, so no need to add. That's why it's going to be inactive. And then we have our dimension. I'm going to add one note here and actually put the dimension key, which is going to be product ID. All right. Looks like we're good to go there. So now this gets us a dimension that only has product in it. However, we still need to add in product subcategory, and we also need product category. And we're going to handle this much in the same way as we handle product. I'm going to drag in another one of these design patterns. Actually, I'm going to drag in two more of these design patterns. And then I'm going to complete these two design patterns in the same way that I completed the first. And then we'll come back and continue from that point. Okay, so I went ahead and created the two additional dimension design patterns just as we did for product. Did that for subcategory and for category. Now, we don't actually want to expose a subcategory and category dimension. If you look at these components, you'll see that they're actually placed in a transformation connection location. The reason we're creating these two dimensions is so that once we do load our product, we'll be able to collect from those dimensions the current attribute values for subcategory and for category. Again, remember that we are collecting in our PSA all versions of all records that have ever been collected from the source system. Now, we don't want, that means that we need to have a way of saying, well, which one is the current version? And current version is the same thing as saying slow change dimension type 1. So that's why we actually have created these dimensions that are not exposed to the end user. They're placed in the transform location. So with that, what we're going to do is just draw a little line here saying we're going to, when we load product, we're going to join to subcategory and we're going to join to category so that we can get the attributes from there and load it into our product dimension. Well, that's simple enough. Now, we have one more thing we need to take care of here, though, and that is if we load this product dimension, and let's say we load a product that's a bike, and it's part of a subcategory A. Well, that's fine, but the only way this product dimension is going to have that bike record updated is if something changes in that product record. In other words, if the subcategory changes or any subcategory attributes, we would never know about it up here. So we need to have a path here that will allow subcategory attributes to update our product dimension. And that's pretty simple to do. All we're going to do here is add a component, and we're going to first bring that component into site. And let's see if I can squeeze it in here without causing too much mayhem. Nope. Tell you what, let's do this. Let's make a little room. I'm going to make this a little smaller here. And then we're going to take these guys and move them up a little bit. And that should give us enough room to bring him in. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So now what we want to do, get that lined up a little better there. There we go. Okay, so now what we want to do is to take our component here, which is going to feed from the same dimension source, and we want to update the subcategory attributes in this dimension. Well, the way we're going to do that, let me look at the shape data on this component. First of all, we're going to call this a dimension product, and then I'm going to just do underscore and say subcategory. This is the notation that I like to use to say, well, I've got a product dimension already in place, and I'm going to update it from my subcategory track with some attribute updates. So we'll just say update dim product with subcategory values. This is going to be a dimension. The template is going to be D102. We haven't explained templates too much yet, but for now we'll just gloss over that. Just briefly though, it just means that we're going to create our dimension from a LeapFrogBI template that gets us started at the closest point to where we're trying to get to. So our connection, this is going to be data warehouse, and our dimension key on this guy is going to be subcategory ID. Okay. So now what we want to do is take him and we want to update our existing dimension. And we're going to note that by just placing this green line here, which has a synonym. This is what the synonym, I'm going to take the word off because it just takes too much room, but the synonym is what's going to actually be created when I build this component with LeapFrogBI, and it's going to point straight to our dimension. We'll look at that a little closer when we actually deploy. All right, so let me move this up here. The same thing needs to happen for our category. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, get the diagram updated, and then come back. Okay, we got the diagram updated now where we have both subcategory and category. Our category track down here where we have a second data flow coming out of our dimension source component, which is going to come over to this dimension component here, which actually is going to go and update the category attributes in our product dimension. And again, we have a green line, which is describing that update. Now, one additional thing I went ahead and added here is that whenever we do this update PSA on our category and subcategory tracks, we need to only do that after both our dimension has been updated as well as our product subcategory attribute or category attributes have been updated. That ensures that PSA is only marking records as being processed once both of those activities have been completed. Now, we could have made a different decision there and actually had two different flags for these two processes, but in this case, I think we're pretty safe to use one flag for that. Okay, so we have now in place a what I would call a three-track data flow diagram, which is going to create and maintain our product dimension. Real quickly to recap, our product dimension is where we're going to keep our product information. The dimension key is on our product ID, which is the same as our source system table that we're using, has product ID as its primary key. Then we're going to augment this dimension with category and subcategory. We decided to not snowflake that or create outriggers to handle that because, again, our whole goal here in creating a dimensional model is, number one, simplicity, and number two, query performance. There's no reason to add an additional two joins to this simple data model just to have a hierarchy normalized. All right, so going back to our data flow diagram that we created, we can see now that we have, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. We have, what do we have, 6, 12, 21, looks like about 23 components it's going to take to actually create this dimension. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you see how quickly that goes. But in short, we have a path for our product where we're going to load our product dimension, and that's going to utilize two other paths, the subcategory and the category path. And then we went ahead and added in a dimension update from both subcategory and category to ensure that we capture any changes in the subcategory or category information that are not directly correlated with product changes. All right, so with that in place, we're going to go ahead and stop this video, and we'll pick up in the next video on another one of our data model objects.